Instructional alignment occurs only when there's a match between what's written, for example, lesson plans, curriculum, standards, what is taught, the instruction, and what is tested, the assessment. In order for students to gain well-aligned instruction, educators must follow these guidelines. The considerations in planning aligned instruction are based on research and alternate assessments and the general curriculum access out of the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Originally, 7 criteria were developed. 4 were derived from federal policy and 3 based on the needs of the population. Later, through the development of the Links for Academic Learning, an additional criteria was added. This revision was based on stakeholders' feedback. Let's review each of the criteria. The first criteria to consider is whether or not the content is academic. This self-checklist can be used for educators in creating academic instruction for students with significant intellectual disabilities. Becoming familiar with your state standards is the most important step in aligning instruction to the general curriculum. Later in this module, we'll spend more time reviewing state standards, extended standards, and how they're written and used. Knowing the major strands in math and science is probably equally important. Each of the core content areas have major strands that have been developed by national content experts. For example, the National Council for Teachers of Mathematics, NCTM, have created strands for mathematics. All students are expected to learn content within each of these strands. Knowing these strands will help teachers and allow them to know more about the content in which they teach, in turn creating more aligned instruction. Finally, collaboration with general education teachers allows the special education teacher to know what is happening in the general curriculum, how it's taught, when it's taught, and what materials are being used to teach this new content. The general education teacher can be a special education teacher's greatest asset. Okay, it's time to challenge your thinking. When planning instruction that is aligned to criteria 1, which is that the skill is academic, would you be able to teach the functional skill of washing your hands? Yes or no? Why? I'll give you some time to think about it. I'll be back in just a few seconds. Sure, washing your hands can be academic. The academic link is created by the way that the teacher introduces the skill and how the students show mastery of the skill. Just asking a student to go wash their hands does not lend itself to an academic skill. However, linking this skill to a lesson in science about germs and microbiology could make it academic. Students may determine how to effectively wash their hands to remove all the germs. For example, that they need soap, warm water, the length of washing their hands. It's a great strategy to link both functional skills to academic skills to create a well-balanced curriculum for students with significant disabilities. Criteria 2 specifies that the student's instruction should be based off of the student's assigned grade level or grade band. For example, a middle school student in the 7th grade may be reading the novel The K by Theodore Taylor. Students in the general curriculum would read chapter books on grade level, make diagrams of story events, describing cause and effect with evidence, identify facts and opinions, write a narrative comparing Philip, the main character's quality of life before and after his boating accident. There will also be some overlapping content, but different performance expectations should be made for students as they progress through the grades. For example, students may work on matching details with main ideas in the 3rd grade, but in the 5th grade they're going to work on the main idea and identifying supporting details. Criteria 3 is very important to instructional alignment. Content should always match, and the performance should match the standard to the greatest extent possible. Here's an example of a state standard in which students identify and analyze forces that cause change to landforms over time. The first step is to identify the content. Forces that shape landforms would be the content. Then to identify the performance. Identify and analyze. In example number 1, Camila, our student, is asked to show mastery of the state standard by activating a switch to listen to a science story about landforms. Does this match the content? No. Does this match the performance? No, not really. In example number 2, Camila is asked to identify pictures of forces that shape the land. Is this a match in content? Yes. What about performance? Yes, there's some match in performance. Camila is identifying forces. But can we do better? Let's try. In example number 3, Camila selects forces, so she's identifying them, and matches them to the actual landform change that it helped make. Is there a match in content? Yes. Is there a match in performance? Yes, and this is a pretty strong link. Criteria 4 is about depth of knowledge and breadth of the content. Are you familiar with Bloom's taxonomy? It's important to teach students to access the curriculum with various levels of depth. Oftentimes, students with significant intellectual disabilities are asked to demonstrate competence at an awareness or recall level only. In order to create aligned instruction, students should be asked to memorize, recall, and compare and contrast. This is not always easy. Later in this module, we'll talk about a strategy called working it across that will help make high-level depth of knowledge more accessible. Students should also have access to a wide range of content, multiple standards, and multiple content strands. Let's revisit the example earlier about the general curriculum expectations for middle school students reading the K. We know that students with significant intellectual disabilities will access the curriculum on an alternate achievement level. Using the same example from before, let's look at what students with significant disabilities may do to show performance. They may listen to a chapter summary of the same book and participate in reading the story. They may select pictures of a fishbone diagram to show cause and effect. They may answer simple questions about the characters in the story. They may also compare the events of the story to their own lives. With this example, there is definitely a link to the performance and the content, as well as depth of knowledge. I think we're ready to move on to the next criteria for working. Criteria 5 assures that students are not taught the same thing year after year after year. Most state standards have objectives that build upon each other year after year. There should also be some differentiation in the content for students year after year. For example, in elementary school, students may use children's picture books, and those books may provide some support for the comprehension. Stories have simpler themes and storylines. Answers can be often found on the same page, so students could match them. But in middle school, chapter books may be used. Students may follow along in their own book. Books may have picture symbol support. Objects could still be used to support comprehension. Themes are more mature, more content to which to glean the answer. Skills may gain deeper application and they become broader. Some are the same, but many of them are new. There are some prerequisite skills that students may not have mastered at an earlier grade level. So for example, if students haven't mastered picture identification, number ID, or new vocabulary, those might be embedded at later grade levels. All these skills are important, and they should all be part of daily instruction. Curriculum mapping is one strategy to help states and school systems design a plan for what content all students should be taught. If you run a web search for curriculum map, you'll find several examples of various content areas in various different grade levels. They're just a plan for instruction that help guide teachers and administrators towards the differentiation from each school year for the students to follow. Next is criteria 6. Far too often, good intentions end up with something else. It's so important that when we're planning our instruction for students that the student achievement matches the selected standard. Here are some good examples of student-aligned achievement, and then also some examples of something else. Pay special attention to what skill the student is being measured on in both student achievement and the something else, and make sure that it's really academic. What you'll find is that the something else, often the skill that students are being asked to demonstrate is not an academic skill, or it's definitely not linked to what the actual standard was supposed to be measuring. Students with significant intellectual disabilities often have several barriers to participating in the content, the way that students in the general curriculum do. Minimizing the barriers lends itself to creating universally designed curriculum. While planning instruction, take a moment to make sure that the book, the computer, the materials, etc. that you're using are accessible. Here are some 3 questions that you can ask yourself while planning to make sure that the barriers have been minimized. Okay, let's move on to criteria 8. Only one more to go. Finally, criteria 8 pays special attention to best practices in the field. Here are some strategies, modifications, and techniques that we, as special educators, know work. The research supports these interventions, and we value them as a field. These best practices should not be forgotten in our journey towards instructional alignment. Well-aligned instruction takes into account all 8 criteria while remaining true to what has been proven effective and the needs for the populations for this section of students. Here's a diagram created to be used as a reminder of all 8 criteria. In order to plan instruction that's well-aligned, each of the 8 considerations must be made. Now we're ready to continue on with the module, remembering the 8 considerations in planning aligned instruction.